Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast. I am your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is a show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. You might be wondering, why the heck am I getting a podcast right after a podcast? And you might be really confused. Okay, so here's what's going on. Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever this stuff comes out, Superman, the Legion of Superheroes is coming out. Okay. And when that comes out, I'm going to be cranking my head, trying to figure out what's good, what's bad, what's broken, what's not. And then also listening to all the complaints about blah, blah, blah. My case didn't come right. Blah, blah, blah. My chase was broken. Blah, blah, blah. The correlation is horrible. Blah, blah, blah. WizKids doesn't guarantee crap anymore. And so I'll read all those threads, process some stuff, and so then I will crank something out to you. My work schedule next week is really interesting because guess what? Friday I work, so I may not be able to get a show up in time. So because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this microcast, and this microcast is sponsored by Tomcats 2. And Tomcats 2 was wondering, yo, man, what's up? I remember you talking about the idea of scaling in higher point games a while back. I was trying to find that podcast, but no luck. You wouldn't happen to know which one I'm talking about, would you? So what's up, Tomcats? The magical digital monkey from Santa Claus. Couldn't retrieve the podcast from YouTube, so I decided to record this for you. So big ups to you, sir, and you have a shout out on the show. Also, considering it's probably within my little requirement to let you know of the contest. Contest. Boom, boom, boom. From Eagle Collectibles. And when I can bring up my wonderful email so I can do this properly, I can actually do this properly. But anyway, from eaglecollectibles.com, and they are sponsoring this time, for our viewership, for a competition, or not competition, for the giveaway. I was going to say competition. That's wrong. The Silver Centurion and 2 common Ironmans. So that is good stuff for you, the listener, because you will be able to receive that. If you send me a question for the AMA for episode 100. And again, the question can be literally about anything. And I will answer it. And so here we go with the proper voice acting. Are you looking to keep a keen eye on your clicks game? Visit eaglecollectibles.com, where we offer great prices for some of the game's best pieces, from SRs to LEs and unique items. eaglescollectible.com. eaglescollectible.com, helping you build your winning collection. All right, so anyway, big up to Eduardo Lares, another Edward out there. Eduardo is just Edward in Spanish. So anyway, big up to Eagles Collectibles. That is EAGLES Collectibles.com. That sounds pretty cool. I can get the DJ voice going. .com. Anyway, so check that out. So moving on to the scaling microcast goodness. And you can call this a flashback episode. So if you sort of remember this lesson, you can feel free to turn it off. I'll try to recapsulate everything from before and then try to introduce some new things. So, a refresher course is not that bad. Really quickly, we can look at the idea of scaling. Some things are really great at 100 points, 200 points, 300 points, but fall off at 400, 500, 600. Some things are really bad at 100, 200, 300, but might start doing well at 400, peak around 500, 600, fall off around 700, 800. And you have some things that scale infinitely. And so we're going to go into that. So the first things first is, how do you determine if something scales properly? You need to look at your point format. If you look at your point format and you're like, man, I need to have X amount of functionality. Dang it, I need blah, 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 blah. Then you need to say, all right, is there anything that I can pull from a lower point value that will still be very functional and very useful and survive and do cool stuff at a higher point value? Well, guess what? If the answer to that is yes, that's doable, guess what? That figure scales. It scales upward. All right. Now, if you say, man, I bring X figure from 500 points and then I bring it down to 300 points and it sucks because I can't put this, and this thing around it. Well, guess what? It might not scale downward. Okay. But then if you say, but the higher points I go, it gets better and better and better, then yeah, it scales up, and it might scale up infinitely. Now, there are some powers that scale up infinitely. Perplex is one of them. No matter what point value you are at, Perplex is a stat mod. Stat mods always scale up infinitely. Okay, because you can never cap all of your stats ever. Like if you try to fill it out through powers. Okay, it's impossible in the game to make it so that all your characters have capped all stats. And someone's going to say, like, but Dark Logos, if I do this and I put the Phoenix Force on and then I do this other thing, then my whole force will have capped stats. I mean, realistically, it's impossible for your force to have capped stats. And you go like, but Dark Logos, I use feats. In a normal game, it's impossible to have capped stats on everybody. So Perplex scales up infinitely. But something like Outwit caps off at really about 600. Why is that? Because once you start hitting 700, 800, you start hitting those colossals, and you see those colossals come out with Power Cosmic, or you see a lot of Power Cosmic, or I can't be outwitted, or you can't draw a line of fire to my entire team. You can't do jack to my entire team because blah, blah, blah man's on the field, and he stops you from doing whatever you're doing, or it's a power action to do outwit, it's a power action to do prob, it's a power action to do perplex, it's a power action to take a step, everything's a power action. Okay, so if you start seeing those guys out there, that's when you start having some problems with outwit, because 9 times out of 10 you're not able to negate a power on everybody. Okay, and you could say, well, but Dark Logos at 300 points, if I play the Infinity Gauntlet on somebody, I can't outwit them. Well, yeah, but in 300 points, if you deal with someone with the Infinity Gauntlet or with Power Cosmic, 9 times out of 10, that's the tent pole. You're really not doing much else. Okay. And so a lot of people just don't realize, that. Okay. A majority of your games, just the way the meta is now, if you're in 100, 200, 300 point games, outwit is great. It's going to screw over something. 400, 500, still pretty good. It's going to mess up something. Again, 600, we've hit that apex. 700, we start getting multiple lower single base power cosmic figures or quintessence figures on the board. There's a problem unless you're able to take that team ability away. And then 800, in comes Big Daddy Kane, aka Galactus, and Tester, and all that other silliness that comes in. And then from that point on, it's about backing up Tester and backing up Galactus. So those are the realities that we're looking at. And you can even say Starro too, if you want to go really back that far, and Spectre, and there's several broke colossals that are the epitome of annoying. So when we look at that concept of scaling, what are we really saying? We're saying, hey, no matter what, it's going to pull its weight in these areas. Now, you got to keep in mind that if a figure is, let's say, 280 points, it probably won't be a figure that's really great for a 300-point meta. Okay? Like, take Quasar, for example. Quasar is a great figure, and if you pull him in a Seal tournament, he's probably going to win the Seal tournament for you. But guess what? Quasar, in a standard constructed 300-point game, gets raffle stomped into the ground, and then reverse rafflecopter to be spun in the air just to be thrown into the ground again. Okay, will Quasar still be able to get some attacks off? Oh yeah. Is it really interesting on how he can operate and do that? Oh yeah, but he's going to get out action real quick. And with all the in-cap silliness that's out there through resource dials and relics and special objects and, you know, heck, special powers and traits, you're just locked down. You're pretty much in trouble. So what does that mean? Does that mean that he, you know, in 400 points, is he automatically in trouble? Well, no, but he doesn't necessarily solve all his problems at 400 points. But once we get to 500 points, then we can say, hey, guy, there's Nick Fury. And Nick Fury allows characters to use that have a shield keyword to move for free if you give Nick Fury the power action. And so, you know, Quasar's power triggers off of him moving for free, moving. And so guess what? It's now for free. And, oh, look, I have an Infinity Gauntlet. Welcome to the tech for, what is it? Incredible Hulk tech. Yeah, that was pretty much the Incredible Hulk tech right there. Nick Fury, Quasar, Infinity Gauntlet, go. Okay, so now that you're sort of aware of that, you see like, oh, okay, this thing is all right, but with Nick Fury, I have infinite actions. So Nick Fury makes this scale up from, 500 points on, that this is broken. And then I add an Infinity Gauntlet or whatever else, and this just becomes sillier. Okay, so you could say, oh, but what happens when Galactus comes out? Unless Galactus two-shots you, which is completely possible, okay, because he's Galactus, you're able to just maintain a steady offense. But if it looks like Galactus is just going to two-shot you, then you might want to say, all right, can this keep scaling upward if I have barrier and map control? And if barrier and map control is not possible, then guess what? 800 points is probably your cap. And so there's some figures that like Puck, for example. Puck is just annoying and great at the same time. Annoying if you face him, great if you have him. Okay. And Puck is great at small point games at 100 and 200 points. He's all right at 300 points. He fills a certain role. At 400 and 500 points, he just gets one-shotted. Like he's pretty much guaranteed to get one-shotted. And I know a lot of people might say, well, hey man, that's unfair analysis of Puck. He did great work for me in that 1,000 points Alpha Flight game that I played. And then I'll sort of cry on the inside, because it's that sort of thing that makes me take steps back. Because yes, he may have survived in this huge game, but you may have also not noticed the fact that your entire team got wrecked by, all your main hitters and your shamans and everything else that you had just got wrecked. And because your opponent was focused on North Star and Aurora and Sasquatch and other people that are actually a lot more deadly. Okay. So let's just look at Puck real quick and try to make my point clear. Puck is 50 points. Okay. So in a 100-point game, he's half your team, but he has a 10 attack and he has quake, and then he has charge. And when he moves into a direct path, after his movement ends, if an opposing character occupies the next adjacent square in that path, that character is knocked back 2 squares, and Puck may then be placed adjacent to that character. So there's a lot of, with that special power, there's a lot of cool control that you can do. There's no penetrating damage on here. All right. And by the time you get something that can, threaten invulnerability, you're on regen. Well, I take that back. You have precision strike, so never mind. So in a 100-point game, Puck can be fun and threatening because you got that quake, you got that precision strike, you got that leap climb, you got that charge. Okay. And then at 100 points, there's not like 5 damage going around. All right. So he's not going to get one-shotted. So he'll take 2 damage and then 2 damage, and then he's going to try to heal back up, and he'll fight it out, and it'll be an interesting game. At 200 points, we can start seeing like maybe a major attacker coming in. But really, all in all, the most damage he's going to take on average is 4, if that much. He's not going to get one-shot at 200 points. 300 points, the possibility of him getting one-shotted is fully possible, because we're talking about a pimped out Supergirl with a heavy and TK from Dark Phoenix and some other backup with a resource dial. Then all of a sudden it's like, Puck really isn't that threatening. 400 points, just, I can get enough perplex and running shot to KO him before he even sees the other half of the map. So you could start to see like, you know what? Even though Puck may have survived a whole bunch of these games, was he really a threat? No, not with 2 damage. Okay, unless you had some weird new Green Lantern tech that you're able to charge with Empower and make a hammer to the face attack that scares everyone, even Odin himself. But I don't know how you're going to do that. And if you figure that out, let me know. Okay. So that's pretty much the core of it. I think the one thing where we start looking at expanding upward or scaling upward is when we look at resource dials. Like I would say hammers cap off around 800 points of them being effective. Because if you have a whole team of hammers and big guys that already have high attacks, I'm sorry, you're really not getting much more out of your guys except for a few powers. Okay. So that's really not too encouraging. The Infinity Gauntlet scales upward infinitely, because you put the Infinity Gauntlet on any Colossal, they are ridiculous. Pure and simple, they are ridiculous. I put it on Onslaught once, and it made him very scary. And Onslaught is not a very good Colossal. Okay, let's just be clear. Onslaught is not a very good Colossal, and for him to take on a Galactus and almost win, that should have never been possible. Do I still like my Onslaught? Yes, but I will probably never ever play him again. Okay. Then you have characters like Batmite, which I just got a Batmite this week. Yay. It cost me $54. But you have characters like Batmite that are great in 300, and then he sucks at 100 and 200. Okay. But he's great at 300, 400, and 500. And then once you start to get to 600, that's when everyone has all the tools to one-shot that little brat. So he's a risk from that point on. He'll let you get an alpha strike, but no one's going to let that little fool stay alive. I love you, Batmite, because I got you, and I hate you at the same time because you're stupid. You're so stupid. Okay. So anyway, going back to resource styles real quick, but then you have something like the power plant where it fluctuates in its awesomeness, because at 300 points, it can be sort of awesome. At 400 points, you get enough figures to pimp out the rings and get the rings all over the place. And, everyone's doing little secret hand gestures saying, oh, it's my turn to get this ring, and all that. At 500 and 600 points, you start able to coordinate, more and more powerful pieces with elements that they needed to just, have a little bit more oomph. Once you start saying like 700, 800, 900, it becomes tricky, because if you start saying blah, 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 team this up on Colossal, blah, 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 team us up on this combination of a team, it really just depends. I can't guarantee to say, oh, this is guaranteed to scale upwards. It's a relative scale. Like the Phoenix Force is the same thing. Like, I can't guarantee that those powers are going to make you scale upward, the entire time. Now, I will say it can be awesome if you have 4 characters with the Phoenix Force, and it's like, hey, we all get +1 stats. This is sort of great if you can survive. But if you're going on through the the tournament through the match, and it's like, there's 2 of us, one of us now has plus 2 stats to everything, then it's not that great. So you could say it has the potential to rise and fall in value in the match itself, which is sort of weird. Okay, so overall, since this is a microcast, I don't have to go a whole hour. You need to look at powers that infinitely scale. Perplex is one. I didn't go into probability control. Probability control infinitely scales, because as long as your opponent has a chance to hit, as long as you have infinite perplexes, you have a chance to make sure that your opponent doesn't hit. Okay. And then we looked at, just point values. What does stuff operate in? And going from there, and then finally looking at resource styles and saying like, hey, figuring out what point value is this good at. The main thing that you just need to see in your analysis is, if I'm doing something, is the counter to whatever the heck I'm doing in this point value? And if it is, can I shut down whatever my counter is with the points that I have left? And then you could say, like, my opponent can't shut down what I'm doing at lower points, but higher points they can, and I can't put in a counter at higher points. Then guess what? You've about hit your wall. Okay. So yeah, you're always going to have some of those odd matchups where it's like, what the heck? That came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting this. Don't judge your scalability on the things that hit you sideways. Always look at it as, wow, I can obviously see that in a golden age meta, this figure is not viable, but in a modern age meta, this figure is viable. So stuff like that. All right. You can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com if you wish to opine. Keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome. You can follow me on Twitter. It came from outer space and told me that comics some days make you cry because of what it does to black people in there. And last but not least, that for anybody who's listening, it's just a reference for the previous show. Anyway, last but not least, you can follow me on the blog, startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com. All right. That's mostly it. I would like to thank again Mr. Tomcats 2. Gotta put a little theme music behind it. Tomcats 2 for his request of information. I hope this was brief enough for you, man, and entertaining. And if you have any other show ideas, just email me. All right. So thanks for listening, and remember, we all have to start over sometime.